I just don't get it. Not that. Hey, what's up? I'm Channel Pup Fanboy Supervillain, and I promise you I am not going out of my way to try to be a contrarian here. All of the opinions I will be expressing in this video are 100% authentic. My opinions are not always popular. I absolutely love Batman and Robin. I think Spider-Man 3 is one of the best superhero movies ever made. For Pete's sake, I'm one of the biggest fans of the Zack Snyder DC films. So yeah, I have some unpopular opinions. But they're real, and they're spectacular. And tonight, we're adding another one to the stack. You've seen the title of the video, you've clicked on it, you know what this is. We're going to be reviewing Joker Folie, Deux, which I'm going to refer to as Joker 2 just to save myself the embarrassment. Subscribe if you haven't already, and if you want to become my boss, the link to the Patreon page is in the description below. Thank you very much. So, one of my very first times ever with dealing with Backlash on YouTube was when I reviewed the first Joker movie. Joker 1, Joker 2019. People were loving that movie. Like, it was very popular. A lot of people calling it a masterpiece. A lot of people really wanted to see it win an Oscar. It really resonated with people, and when I first saw it, I was just a bit disappointed by it. I found the film had all the subtlety and nuance of a plank to the face, and it felt like it just all amounted to this very loud message that was kind of just an observation stating the obvious. And the night I released that review, I lost over 100 subscribers. Now, that was 100 subscribers out of, I think, about 40k or so no need to panic, but I didn't handle it well. I thought, oh geez, did I screw up? Do I need to backpedal this? Do I need to rethink this? And yeah, I deleted the video. I released a video that kind of worded things very differently, when in actuality, all that happened when people unsubscribed over that video was that some people jumped ship because they were subscribed to me for the wrong reasons in the first place. They weren't really subscribed to me so much as they were subscribed to the times when what I've had to say suited their own personal agenda. Alright, I want you to think about that. I want you to keep that in your head for a minute. I am a bit different now, though. While I don't love Joker 2019, I do appreciate it for what it is. A compelling film with a basic premise. I still find it a bit derivative, shallow, and indulgent, but I'd much rather watch Todd Phillips masturbate some of his favorite movies back-to-back with one of fiction's greatest villains facing the crowd than a lot of other more recent offerings in the cape-shit subgenre. I see the appeal, and I get a great deal of enjoyment out of that film. But it's not one that I'm massively attached to, which may play a role in why I don't subscribe to the narrative that Joker 2 harmed the legacy of the first film. In fact, I enjoyed it a great deal. And I'm gonna drive the knife in just a little further and say, I liked it more than the first one. Now, obviously, I do not want to shoot down any legitimate criticisms here because there's a lot of great points going around. I've got my own criticisms, Lord knows, but I think the sheer level of vitriol surrounding the narrative of this film is coming from people that didn't actually watch the movie. Either that or there is a refusal to accept the movie on its own terms. I'm by no means dismissing criticism here. It is a flawed movie, but I can't bring myself to say it's a bad movie by any stretch. So the story this time follows the events of the first Joker movie. Arthur's killed the Wall Street guys, he killed Murray Franklin on live TV, and he's made a real spectacle of himself with this newfound Joker persona. Now in prison, Arthur Fleck has been behaving himself and keeping his nose clean. And he's pretty well liked as well. The guards at the penitentiary seem to get along with him, and Arthur Fleck's attorney is making a case for Arthur to be moved from the penitentiary to more of a care unit, while Gotham District Attorney Harvey Dent is pushing for the death penalty for Arthur. So much of the film's first half takes place in Arkham, and this place really does feel super grungy and oppressive. It is a shithole. But I really did enjoy the dynamic that Arthur has with his fellow inmates and guards. Then a lot of the second half of the film takes place in the courtroom. And yeah, that does bring me to this next point, that this is an incredibly symbiotic sequel. A lot of this hinges on recapping and recontextualizing that first movie, which I understand has been a bone of contention for a lot of this film's critics. I personally don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, though, as it does offer new perspectives on that, and it's in service of a new narrative. One that is all about the dichotomy between Arthur Fleck and the Joker, and that no one really cares about Arthur Fleck. So he has his supporters in the court stands, and the general public, but these are all people who support Joker, because the Joker happens to serve this very anarchical kind of fuck the establishment agenda. So one side really only cares about that Joker persona, that fantasy that Arthur's been living out, and the other side wants him dead. So it's either save the Joker or kill Arthur Fleck. And this is where the film takes a very interesting swing in a different direction than I think a lot of people were anticipating. This film is not about the Joker and Harley Quinn. It's not even about the Joker. It's about Arthur Fleck, with the Joker being this kind of shadow that looms over him. A fantasy that he can finally escape into when things get too intense, when he has to confront parts of his past and who he is that he cannot comprehend. I think as far as a lot of viewers were concerned, by the end of Joker 2019, Arthur Fleck had become the Joker. It kind of worked on that basis that that was an origin story for that character. Whereas you go into Joker 2, and this is still the story of Arthur Fleck battling with his shadow. And you know, if you didn't want that and you just wanted this to be a Joker and Harley movie, that is completely valid. I said about Batman v Superman as well, you know? Like, some people would rather have just a straightforward meat and potatoes Batman and Superman movie than a near-perfect allegory for the political climate in the United States. Just as some people would rather have a Joker and Harley Quinn movie than a movie about how crime, mental illness, and legal proceedings can just become a form of entertainment to the masses. And look, Lord knows I've wanted a really great Joker and Harley Quinn movie for the longest time, and we are still yet to see that. But I'm gonna be honest, based on the first Joker movie, I at no point thought that this movie was going to deliver on that. Especially with all the trailers showing that Harley Quinn was going to be an inmate rather than a psychiatrist, and I'll get more into that later. I never went in with the expectation that this was going to be a proper Joker and Harley Quinn movie, so much as another little Elseworlds thing, with its own stories to tell, and that's exactly what we got. I really do love the themes here though, and I think the timing of this is especially great, like considering we fairly recently had, like, the Depp v. Heard trial. And that was a total media circus. That was just pure entertainment for a lot of people. When in actuality, some shit went down. The people calling for the death penalty for Arthur do not care the context of his killings, the why and the how of it. And the funny thing is, his supporters don't care about that either. They don't care about Arthur Fleck. They care about this icon that they've built up for themselves. They love the image, the fantasy of it. When Arthur actually has a good lawyer who is actually lobbying for his best interests, she gets fired because she's failing to win anybody's support, but she's actually honest and genuine and on his side. Arthur goes on to have the Joker represent him, and suddenly he starts making a little headway. I think one of my favorite scenes in this film is in the courthouse when Gary Puddles is called to the stand. And Joker is there in his clown paint, he's doing this Colonel Sanders-ass accent, playing lawyer, and he's not taking it an iota seriously. But they make a big point of saying Arthur Fleck never made fun of Gary Puddles, and that Gary Puddles considered Arthur Fleck a friend because, yeah, he noticed that. Meanwhile, when Puddles enters the courtroom, there's people jeering and laughing at his height. They have him sat on a Yellow Pages book rather than having a chair to actually accommodate for him. In this scene, while, yeah, Arthur's wearing clown paint and doing this Kentucky accent, like, no one in that courtroom is taking this any more seriously than he is. They're all just looking for someone else to laugh at, and they're sensationalizing Arthur as well. There's the moment where Zazie Beetz' character is talking all about how Penny Fleck made such a mockery of her son, and telling the courtroom how Arthur's a virgin. And it's in those moments where we kind of see the internal world of the Joker, that internal fantasy that Arthur lives out in his head. And that's where the musical numbers come in. And as far as musicals go, this is a weird one because, yeah, there's not a lot of music in it for a musical, but there's a lot of music in it for it to not be a musical, if that makes sense. And I've heard some fair criticisms of the way the musical numbers are utilized here. A common criticism I've heard is that Todd Phillips doesn't really demonstrate any understanding of how to integrate musical numbers into this film organically, and that the whole thing would have worked better as a drama. And I think that's true about 50% of the time. There are times when a scene is kind of onto something, but then they go and cut to a musical number, and then it's like the next day. So we kind of nip a scene in the bud there. It's kind of like if a scene doesn't know how to end, we'll put a song in there. But then there's like the other 50%. Now, forgive me, I can't remember what every single song is. I have only seen the film the once, and it is also like 6 a.m. right now. But there is the scene in the courtroom where Zazie Beetz' character is talking all about Penny Fleck, and he goes into his own Joker fantasy world where he's tearing up the courtroom and bashing the crap out of the judge. That was a great one. I also love when Harley's kind of singing to Arthur from the other side of the visitor glass, and she draws the smile on the glass and it lines up with his face. That's a really well-directed scene as well, because you can see the reluctancy in Arthur to kind of succumb to that Joker persona. But at the end of the day, he's very easily manipulated because he is in such a vulnerable state. There's a song where it starts to become clear that Arthur is recognizing that maybe Harley is leading him to his demise, as at the end of that number, she pulls a gun out on him. These musical numbers here are great ways of conveying kind of where Arthur's head's at, what he does and doesn't understand of what's going on, his interpretation of everything that's going on around him. And there was a really clever use as well of like musical dialogue versus spoken dialogue towards the end, where Harley is singing to Arthur, but Arthur's like, no, let's just talk now, because she is stuck in that fantasy, whereas Arthur in this instance has broken out of that fantasy. That was really clever. So I'm gonna be honest, I'm 50-50 on the musical aspect. I think, yeah, there were times when it did just feel like a bookend to a scene, but there was also some really great stuff here. And of course, Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, they can sing. So it does make the musical numbers watchable in that regard. But that also falls into kind of how expressive the filmmaking is this time compared to the first one. Now, again, I said the first one was an expertly crafted movie, but when it comes to like a story told from the perspective of the Joker, I kind of don't want it to just be like a straightforward kind of drama piece, you know? I want to see fun cutaways that express who this guy is. So I thought musical numbers were kind of a no-brainer for that. And yeah, it works really well here for the most part. The opening of the film is animated like a Looney Tunes cartoon, and does a really nice job at kind of setting up the journey that Arthur's going on in this one, that the Joker is a specter that looms over him, and that we're going to be delving into more of kind of a split personality aspect. But I also just loved how it was animated, the use of what the world needs now. I think it was the Tom Jones version as well, which I thought was a really tasteful choice. And I think across the board, I think Todd Phillips' directing in this one just feels that bit more confident this time. It's not quite so impressionistic of, say, Martin Scorsese. Like, if Joker 1 was very much like taking Taxi Driver, King of Comedy, and Fight Club and sticking it in a blender, this one's influences are a little less on the sleeve, shall we say. It feels a bit more like its own beast. Obviously, there's elements of like the singing detective in there, but this one definitely felt less derivative and a lot more original. But I also mentioned that, yeah, the first film was not only very miserable, but also very meditative as well. This film here, yeah, it is just as miserable, if not maybe more so, but the fact that we've got these musical numbers and the fact that we've got this animated opening means that we've expressed misery in just more interesting ways. Ways that can feel a bit more uplifting. I can see why Arthur would take comfort in this Joker fantasy of his. If I did have to criticize directing just a little bit though, in those musical numbers, I think the blocking and the use of space could have been a lot better. You tend to have these fairly elaborate stage sets, which look great, by the way. I especially love like the moonlit Gotham Hotel, but they're not really making much use of the space in those sequences. It's mainly just the Joker and Harley standing in place, singing to each other. I'm also just gonna say though, like, the musical aspect worked for me. I'm glad they did that. I think if you strip that away as well, you are left with a lot of recap of the first film. I do think that these musical numbers were a nice glue that held this together, but at the same time I understand that if you're not into musicals, which I also personally am not massively into musicals, this could just ruin the entire experience for you. I get that completely. But I think in this case it actually worked, more often than not. There are definitely instances where it works better than others. You know, I also think the film is just a bit more nuanced than the first one with how characters beyond Arthur are conveyed. In the first film, pretty much everybody was an absolute piece of shit. Okay, not Gary Puddles, he was chill. But it seemed like everybody, except for Gary, was working against Arthur. And it was very unrelenting. This one is a bit more nuanced with the relationships of Arthur. There's this sort of iffy friendship between Arthur and one of the guards at Arkham, played by Brendan Gleeson, and Brendan Gleeson's character kind of drifts between kind of bully behavior to kind of a bit more affectionate towards Arthur. But Brendan Gleeson was great because he did add some levity to the movie that you kind of feel a little bad for laughing along with at times, but at the same time, Gleeson's delivery is just great. There's that part where they prank another inmate into asking Arthur if he can give him a kiss, and yeah, I genuinely laughed. I felt bad about it. These guys are clearly abusing their power, but I laughed. I'm kind of part of this movie's problem. But you also see that abuse of power evolve into something else entirely. Joker, during his trial, goes on this rant about everything he's been through, and during that rant, he refers to the Arkham guards as being fat. Offended by this, the guards gang up on him, beat him, and, well, yeah. If you've seen the movie, you know what they did. Now, this is very much a catalyst for the third act, where the Joker stops being a fantasy. Arthur Fleck is no longer the Joker. Never again. He rocks up to the courtroom with the Joker makeup on, but he's Arthur. And I think there is a conversation to be had about whether or not it's right to use something like that as a catalyst for the third act of a movie. Should this have been what caused that shift? I don't know how much that conversation is flying around. I suppose when I try to think of it myself, I'm like, could they maybe have just beaten him? But at the same time, it's the difference between beating someone and violating them, you know? We've seen Joker get beaten up many, many times. That hasn't shaken him out of his Joker persona. This is the kind of thing that probably would. But okay. During the trial where the verdict is given, the Joker is gone. Arthur Fleck is just Arthur Fleck, a guy that needs help. But the jury have decided that he is guilty on all counts. The death penalty awaits Arthur Fleck, until a car bomb goes off outside and Arthur is rescued by two Joker fanatics. He's eventually caught by the police, brought back to Arkham, where an inmate who was a Joker fanatic feels so let down by Arthur being Arthur, and kills him. Now, while I don't like this ending for other reasons, there are things about it that certainly work. A big element of this film being that if you fail to entertain, if you fail to appease your audience, you're not worth jack shit. Joker's original attorney didn't make the progress she needed to make because she just wasn't entertaining enough. She's a good person in this universe and she's punished for it. Arthur finally rids himself of his Joker persona and he's killed for it. Because Arthur isn't entertaining, and if you're not entertaining, you're not worth shit. So Arthur's death works very well there. What I don't like is the tease for the real Joker. That as Arthur bleeds out and dies, his internal Joker monologue comes back one last time to say someone is taking his place. The killer starts howling with laughter and slicing up his mouth to get that Joker grin. Okay, so remember Gotham, the TV series? How they had Cameron Monaghan play the literal most perfect live-action Joker ever? But due to Warner Brothers mandates, if anyone asked them, oh, is he the Joker? They had to say no. And in the press, the narrative was always, no, he'll never go on to become the Joker. He's the guy that will inspire the real Joker. Fortunately, that fucking garbage never became apparent in the actual show itself. Now, listen, I understand that there is the whole multiple Jokers thing in the comics, but the Joker is villain royalty, okay? He's one of fiction's greatest, most iconic villains of all time. He's smart, he's creative, he's inventive, and just incredibly cruel. When you take that character and you tell me that they are a copycat of another criminal that preceded him, yeah, nah. That idea should always be shot down. Arthur getting killed, I'm fine with. That feels like the logical next step. But this tease of the real Joker who was inspired by him just doesn't do it for me. And I think this is one area where Joker 2 kind of fails. I have accepted that these are Elseworlds movies. I do not need these to connect to Batman mythology because we're never going to see this Joker in a Batman movie. It doesn't matter. But they've tried to make some things line up. everyone said the same thing. Oh, by the time Bruce Wayne grows up, the Joker's gonna be an old man. And now they've swapped him out for a younger Joker, one that will grow up to become the Joker that fights Batman. And just no. I do not need this to tie to a future Batman series that's never going to happen. Just think about the logistics of this. Every time Batman battles his arch nemesis and it makes the headlines, people are gonna bring up that other Joker from years ago, the one that inspired him. With Gotham, they at least made who the actual Joker turned out to be, Jeremiah Valeska, kind of more crazy than Jerome and kind of made him the origin of all of Jerome's pain. But if it's just like Batman's arch nemesis was a fan of another guy who was called the Joker, and now he's the clown prince of crime, just, brother, what is that? That idea should always be shut down. There are other areas where this does kind of tie to Batman mythology. Harvey Dent is the district attorney, and when the car bomb goes off, you see that his face is a bit burnt and scarred. Okay, that one's not so bad. The one that was a little egregious to me was kind of Harley Quinn's backstory. Oh fuck, yeah, Harley Quinn's in this movie, isn't she? I almost forgot. So okay, yeah, one big deviation from the comics is that Harley Quinn is not a psychiatrist at Arkham that falls in love with the Joker through the Joker's manipulation. She's an inmate and a Joker fangirl. But it turns out that she's just manipulating Arthur into kind of goading him to be the Joker full time. So you've kind of got this reverses of the Joker and Harley Quinn, and you know what? I can kind of dig it. Someone who wants to be better, someone who wants them to be worse. It's a toxic relationship, just like that of the Joker and Harley Quinn. And we've got a role reversal kind of akin to the Batman Telltale games. But then there's a moment where they reveal that Harley's just a big liar, and that she actually was a psychiatry major, and that her parents were rich and bought her way into Arkham so that she could meet her hero, the Joker. Okay, so the reason anyone took issue with her not being a psychiatrist was that it took all the tragedy away from Harley's story. Here we've made it so, yeah, she is that brilliant woman, but she inflicted all of this upon herself willfully, so you don't really have that level of tragedy there. Harley wasn't manipulated, she chose this, so what does her being a psychiatrist with rich parents add to this? I mean, okay, they wanted her to be a liar, fine, but, like, that just screamed to me, oh look, see, I swear it's like the comics. I was like, I don't need you to be like the comics. That said, clearly some people do. I don't need this to be like the comics. I want this to be less like the comics. The idea of movies about people that kind of fall into that Joker philosophy, one bad day, madness being the emergency exit. It's a cool concept. Just make movies about these people that, yeah, fall into that Joker philosophy. You can make them like kind of anthology movies in a way, but like they don't actually have ties to Batman mythology. That's a cool idea. And these Joker movies really could have been that. But instead they have this weird kind of long-distance relationship with Batman mythology, despite kind of really asserting themselves as this Elseworlds thing. So I'm just saying, I don't think Harley Quinn, you know, being a bit more comic accurate here adds anything to this story, nor do I think the fact that there's a real Joker that's going to fight Batman later adds anything to this. And it's like, while we're trying to force all these pieces into place to form this Batman mythology, like, with the new Joker, the one that's gonna be Batman's arch nemesis, he can't have a Harley Quinn. At least not in the classic sense, which is clearly what they're trying to kind of build this into. And it's not like there's ever gonna be a sequel to this anyway. Okay, so Harley Quinn is an afterthought in this movie. You could easily make a version of this film without her in it, and it would be virtually the same. So Harley Quinn is basically just emblematic of the Joker cult. She's the personification of that hysteria, that desire to pursue this fuck the establishment fantasy. You take that big Joker mob that want nothing more than for Arthur Fleck to go full Joker and to be that character, turn it into one singular character that the Joker can fuck, and then you've got Harley Quinn. And I can't help but feel that Lady Gaga was a little wasted here. Which, yeah, why is the film called Joker Folie? Deux? There's nothing French about this movie, and the Joker and Harley's relationship just feels like an afterthought, so, like, I don't know, like, maybe better just call this movie Arthur. That's the thing, is where I think this movie really succeeds is being a story about Arthur Fleck and his relationship with this Joker persona. We don't really explore stories where the Joker wants to get better, and I really appreciate that this is what we've done here. We've gone away from the expected. We've veered away from the path that would take Arthur to being Batman's archenemy. A story that could make us ask, Is Arthur's death better than him living to be the Joker full time? It's just unfortunate that the ending kind of cowers away from that in favor of being like, no, there will be a Joker that can be Batman's archenemy. It's an ending that does kind of undercut what came before. But honestly, it didn't ruin the film for me. At the end of the day, this was still an incredibly gripping, compelling, and entertaining time. I thought the use of musical numbers as a means of keeping us up to speed with what Arthur knows and understands about the events of this movie, and a way of conveying his fantasies was really smart. The hit rate isn't 100%, but it was a smart choice, and I think more often than not, it worked. Everything at Arkham had just this spectacular atmosphere to it. And I know courtroom dramas aren't for everyone, but this was not exactly your run-off-the-mill legal jargon courtroom proceeding. The scenes where Arthur is using the Joker to represent himself are the most jokery Joaquin Phoenix's performance has ever felt. The themes of us treating seriously ill people as entertainment and how we reject them as soon as they fail to entertain us, and how these fanatics and the media circus make it kind of impossible for Arthur to get better when he genuinely wants to be, really doubles down on the tragedy of Arthur Fleck. I had a chat with my buddy Boba Talks about this movie, and he personally kind of felt that Arthur's story of becoming the Joker was better left at Joker 1, with him just becoming the Joker and the rest is history. That while this story on its own 2 feet does work, these are just creative decisions that he personally didn't agree with. I gotta say, for this Elseworlds take, I honestly vibe with it. Making part 2 of the Joker's story, him wanting to get better, was such a swing, and to do it in such a stylized way, genuinely, I'm pretty impressed. It's not a perfect movie by any means. It is a lot more clunky than the first movie was, and a lot more flawed overall. But what an interesting beast this one turned out to be. It's much more interesting than the first movie was, in my opinion. And I like it a lot more for that. But I mean, maybe that just kind of aligns with my tastes anyway. Like I mentioned earlier that I love Spider-Man 3. I'm a fan of Zack Snyder movies. I like things that are very stylized. I like fairly out there visions for what these movies can be. I see merit in flawed movies so long as there's conviction and confidence in the vision. And I think Joker Folie Deux slots into that nicely. It's flawed, but I love what it's doing. So hell yeah, I really like Joker 2. I'll go to bat for it. It's got a lot of flaws, but it's got a lot going for it as well, and I don't think it's being given credit where it's due. Again, really do not want to dismiss criticisms towards this movie because there's so much valid criticism there. Lord knows I have my own, but this narrative that this is this dog shit movie that has completely tarnished the legacy of the first, well, I just plain don't get it. But I'm gonna leave it to you guys now. What do you think? Did you enjoy Joker 2? Comment below, discuss, and as always, if you've enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below is the link to my Patreon page, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get your name in the credits of these videos, with a special shout out going to the patrons in the $5 and above tier. They are Cho Henshin, KB, RT0, Kalex, Hypes, Sad Goku, Dare Denny, SSS06, Kale Bennett, Ken K, Mr. SP, Cirrus the Skeptic, Biotin, oh no, I've used up all of the helium, what am I meant to do now? And Vera Wild. Thank you, good folks, so much for your generosity, and to those of you at home, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Now get out of here.